Mike DeVito here, and today I want to talk about the minimal facts argument for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This argument starts by looking at three facts that are virtually agreed upon by all historical scholars, from atheist and agnostic scholars to Christian and Jewish scholars. Across the board, historical scholars will agree on these three facts. Now, the argument starts with these three facts and argues that the best way to account for these facts is the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. So let's look at the three facts. First, there's the fact that Jesus died by crucifixion. This is attested in the Gospels as well as a number of sources outside of the biblical narratives. Josephus, Lucius Tacitus, Lucian Tacitus. There were a number of non-Christian early sources that attest to the fact that Jesus died by crucifixion. The second fact is the empty tomb. This is seen in all the Gospels, all four Gospels, account to the fact that 3 days after Jesus' death, his tomb was found empty by a group of women disciples. And so the key here is with the fact that the women were the first ones to come upon the tomb. Because if somebody were making up this account, especially in first century Rome, they would not have placed women as the first witnesses to the empty tomb. Because back in first century Palestine, women's testimony wasn't held nearly as in the regard of a man's testimony. And so if somebody were making up the story, they certainly wouldn't put women first at the tomb because it would discredit the story. So this suggests that this is a truthful account. And the third fact is that something radically happened to Peter, James, and Paul. We see that Peter, James, and Paul, prior to the resurrection, were all at some point either mocked or persecuted Jesus and Christians. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. James, the brother of Jesus, mocked Jesus and openly mocked his message. And then Paul persecuted Christians and killing Christians. And so we see three basically not enemies. And Peter really wasn't an enemy, but certainly Paul was an enemy. And then Peter and James, who weren't totally convinced of Jesus' message, become radically changed after the resurrection, where James becomes the head of the church in Jerusalem. Obviously, Paul writes most of the New Testament, and we see the change in Peter as well. And so the question is, what happened that caused this change in these three men? And now history also accounts, again, non-biblical sources account of the martyrdom of James and Peter and Paul outside of the biblical narratives. And so obviously, history shows that these men died for their faith. And so what would it take for you to die for this message? The old saying goes, liars make poor martyrs. And so something happened to Peter, Paul, and James, who denied Jesus prior to the resurrection, but then were radically changed after what appeared to them to be the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so now with these three facts in place, the question is, what is the best story we can give to account for these three facts? What is the most reasonable explanation for these three facts? And I'll leave it up to you to think of some naturalistic explanations, but suffice it today to say they all fall short, and the resurrection is clearly the best way to account for these three facts.